Welcome to the Uncanny Women Podcast, where we have honest, year-round conversations with women and gender-diverse authors and filmmakers in horror. Here, we explore the voices behind the work and how lived experience shapes the stories they tell. I'm your host, horror writer and founder of the SoCo Women in Horror Festival, KJ Brantley. Now let's step into today's conversation and meet our guest. Today, I'm joined by Hailey Piper, a Bram Stoker Award-winning author of Queen of Teeth and Teenage Girls Can Be Demons, among many others. She's incredibly prolific. We'd honestly be here all day if I listed everything that she's ever written. But her novel, No Gods for Drowning, is back in print. She has 2 upcoming releases. This movie doesn't end the way we want, and she isn't herself tonight. She's an unflinching, masterful storyteller, doing some of the best work in horror right now. So welcome, Hailey. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you. I just want to dive right in because you have 2 new books coming out this fall.
I know, it's a lot.
That's crazy. That is a lot. How do you do it? But I'm going to just have to fill my TBR with Hailey Piper. But this movie doesn't end the way we want, and she isn't herself tonight. What can you share about them, and what excited you most while writing these?
This movie doesn't end the way we want. It's based on a short story I wrote a few years ago. And I'd always had kind of an idea of like where it could go, how it could expand, like what was really happening under the surface of it. And I started finally writing it, I think in like 2023 and then through 2024. It's about, in 1994, 3 girls go to the movies in their small town and only one of them comes out. 30 years later, the survivor finds out that the movie isn't done with her yet.
That sounds really spooky.
Yeah, it's my cursed film book. It's kind of a love letter to movies because I really love movies, and the thing with me is that if I love something, I need to ruin it a little bit in writing horror. So I poured a lot of my passion for that in there, but there's also just like, okay, well, here's how it can be scary too, just to be alone in the dark sometimes.
Yeah, that's awesome. A little bit of masochism there, or just
maybe, I don't know. I think that the more you care about something, the more emotion you can put into discussing it. And, horror is a genre of emotion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. Wow. So do these upcoming books explore like new territory for you, or do they build upon themes, that you've been interested in for a while? I mean, I know you mentioned the cursed film and already writing about, kind of making things horrific that you enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's kind of why I think I write a lot of stuff set in cities because I really love being in cities. So I'm like, oh, what kind of horrors can I write about within something that I enjoy? Whereas like I grew up in the woods, and you might notice none of my books, except for like some of the stuff in Teenage Girls Can Be Demons, so short stories, novellas, are set in the woods because I'm like, I already lived enough of that. I could write a really interesting, I think, in the woods horror book because I grew up in it, but I'm just like
I left it for a reason.
Yeah, a story hasn't called to me yet. Like they're like She Isn't Herself Tonight. Rabbit, the main character, she grew up in the woods also, so that is in her backstory, and it does inform on some things. But like me, she now lives in a city. And sometimes, like, I think, like, you miss the stars is one of the things in there. Like, her backstory is that she was abducted by aliens when she was 10 and then 20. And so in the city where she lives, she's like, the sky is always dark because there's so much light coming from the ground, the light pollution. She does miss that. Her thing is that she finally tells her, she's 30, and she finally tells her boyfriend, I've been abducted by aliens. It's probably going to happen again. At which point he dumps her, evicts her from their home, and her life just spirals out of control from there. So as far as themes are concerned, Movie Doesn't End is kind of about the integrity of art. Or this movie doesn't end the way we want. I keep abbreviating it when I talk to people about it because I'm like, it's the longest title of any of my books. But as far as themes, yeah, it's about integrity of art. It's about how people can be blamed for things that really aren't their fault. Like that's like the main character was 15 when this happened, and everyone seems to, including herself, act like it's her fault the other girls disappeared. She Isn't Herself Tonight is the theme stuff is very complicated with that book, because Rabbit is one of my favorite characters I've written, but I also put a lot of my anxieties into her, or she drew them out of me. And I'm just like, how much of the theme is just like, yes, this is how it feels when you don't trust yourself, or there's too much self-loathing, like her, or you just been hurt by someone. This is kind of what the book is about in a nutshell. It's like, for every girl full of love who poured it all into others before learning it will not be returned, and has spent her life since trying to feel full again.
That's beautiful.
I think that's really what the book is about, what the themes of it about. So as far as like whether that's new territory, I think that coheses with a lot of my other work. Movie Doesn't End is different, I would say, in the sense that I think it's my scariest book. I don't want to call it traditional horror, but I don't know. There's something about it that just feels
cursed horror.
Yeah, it's just something about it feels separate from other work of mine. Like I think when people, I say that all the time, it's like, well, I write a lot of different things. You know, people who love some of my books are going to hate some of my other books, but then I'll still have people coming in who are like, I've loved every one of your books. I've read them all. I'm like, have a very eclectic taste, or I just don't notice the, how these books link together as much as other people outside, because I think that's just a part of art, is when you're writing it, you're creating it, painting, dancing, music, whatever, there's a point where it crosses over an unseen boundary and it becomes more a part of other people than it is of you. There's that genesis, and it's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen this, where like people try to explain when you see all the ways your art was put together, it's kind of like you're seeing the back of an embroidery hoop, or embroidery, I should say, and other people are just seeing the front of it. Of course, you're going to see all the the patterns and where the needle threaded and where it's tied off and such. But yeah, so it's possible that
background messiness,
right? It's possible I just can't see these things as much, because in the same vein, or maybe I'm just a very oblivious person, honestly, because it took me a while to realize that I've written mostly cosmic horror books. I didn't know that before, but I'd have a book out and I'd be like, oh, it's like Light Most Hateful is a good example. I was like, oh, it's a small town horror book in the vein of a lot of like 80s horror. And then people were coming in, it's like, this is cosmic horror. And I was like looking at the stuff, I was like, oh, I did do that again. You're right. So that's happened many times. So it's just like, I can totally see where I wouldn't see the connections between the themes of different books, in the same sense that I couldn't even see a freaking subgenre for some of them.
No, I can see that though. Like I've, recently read some R.J. Joseph's like Hell Hath No Sorrow, Like a Woman Haunted. And I feel like your work in that way, like as hers, like it has this, like you have such a unique, amazing voice and just excellent, prose and characterization. I love your work, but I see that crossover, like you both seem to write like this cosmic horror with like these emotional themes to it. So I can see that. So that must be one of the commonalities.
I start to see it now. Like now it kind of jumps out, like not maybe while I'm writing it, but it does jump out before it gets to the readers now necessarily. And it's possible that with RJ Joseph and myself, we just have weird outlooks, and it just cosmic horror just comes naturally to that. But she's also very like emotion driven writer. And I just like, I think that's so important in art. I think having the emotional resonance is really crucial to all forms of art, because I think people sometimes see cosmic horror as very simplified, because our main ideas of it come from certain men like Lovecraft, for example, who like, no, this is about stoic academic outlook that is then broken by an illogic. And it's like, well, yeah, it can be that, but human beings still have emotions beyond just like, I can't handle this. Like there's a lot going on there, and it's complicated.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so it sounds like she isn't herself tonight. Going back to that a little bit, it sounds like you put a lot of yourself into this book. Do you think would you agree that this book might be one of your most, I guess, based on your own personal views, experiences? Like, do you think this character is very you that you wrote, or, compared to like your other books that you've written before?
I mean, they all have pieces of me. I think Queen of Teeth is the one that most is like, I've told people this before. I just poured my personality into a bucket and dumped it all over the manuscript. So like that book, like just throughout just feels that way. Rabbit it's hard to say because there's parts of her where I'm just like, there's a lot of stuff where it's like, I would never do this, but it's just like, I could see how someone else who has certain similarities to me would do that with different circumstances. I have problems Rabbit doesn't have. Rabbit has problems I don't have. But I would say, yeah, there's definitely, I was trying to do something very specific with She Isn't Herself Tonight, because David Lynch had talked about, or I shouldn't say he talked about, he did talk about it a little bit, but more people were talking about it as far as his work is concerned. Letting emotion guide the narrative to a point that it is what comes before logic, what comes before the solidity of the world, that emotion can be so strong that it can bend how the world works. And I am a very like structure oriented writer a lot of the time. I have very like kind of I can see the architecture of what the book it looks like a lot of the time. With She Isn't Herself Tonight, I tried to let go of that as much as I could. I tried not to feel like each thing had to be rooted necessarily in, well, this is why this is happening. I kind of tried to let Rabbit take the wheel a little more. And my characters tend to do that anyway. I will have a hard time. Like if I've written something and the character written it so the character does something that they wouldn't do, it bothers me. Like I will get up from the computer and I will have a headache. I will be stressed out. It will ruin my day until I go back in and be like, no, that's not what they would do. Like I gotta fix this. This isn't right. But there's still a guidance as far as the narrative is concerned. Like there's a dance between plot and character. Okay. She Isn't Herself Tonight, I really just went with what I felt Rabbit was going to do next. I didn't worry so much about how this, that, or the other thing was applying to that. It's like, we'll do that later. We'll figure that out in editing. Just let her run loose. And that led to some interesting things. And I definitely know there's going to be people reading this book who are going to be like, no, don't do that to her, which is fine. Like, I think that makes it interesting. And I'm like, I'm trying to let go a little more. I'm trying to let go of that control a little more because I'm interested in seeing where that goes. And I very much because I fixate so much on emotion, I want to be like, I can let emotion guide things. I can let emotion decide how the world works, as opposed to the world deciding these are the emotions that are okay. This is how much of them are okay. These are the ones you need to box up, because I feel that, and this kind of applies to This Movie Doesn't End the Way We Want. I feel that when somebody is grieving, there are some people who are there for them, but a lot of people act like they have a communicable disease. Like, your grief is going to catch on to me. We have to isolate you. We have to get away from you and separate from you. And I don't know, that freaking disturbs me.
Yeah, people have a hard time sitting with uncomfortable emotions or being around it. You're right. It is that sort of like, oh my gosh, it's going to depress me, or I'm not going to be able to deal with this.
And that's why, and I just kind of blasted this on social media last week, was just about how like you really people need to flex that muscle. And I do feel that uncomfortable books can help them do that. Because it's not right that people, a friend comes and is like, I've got this problem, this is going on. Somebody's like, oh, why are you trauma dumping? Like, acting like, why are you treating your friends as a burden? Like, that's messed up. And it's messed up that the world has conditioned a lot of people to look at things that way. And I feel that, like, books that make you uncomfortable can make you more emotionally intelligent. They can make you more emotionally resilient and better at being there for people, and better at trusting people to be there for you. And I just feel that's so important. So it's like, yeah, sometimes you need uncomfortable books. And I also feel like we've seen that proven out with like people, like there were studies after like, you know, after 2020 that people who were into horror emotionally handled things with, you know, the onset of COVID better than people who weren't interested in that, who tried to like, no, I just want my comfort stuff. I just want my cozy stuff. And there's nothing wrong with indulging in that sometimes. But I also think you need, it's like, you can't just eat candy.
Right.
You know, you're not healthy doing that. You need a full, you know, you need all your nutrients.
Full range.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're so right about that. And I think even so, I have a total paranoid fear about like parasites and things like that. Like I am like a weird OCD person about that. But then I read Nick Cutter's The Troop, which is like probably the worst like book for somebody with that. But it actually, I realized like reading more things like that, like even that, like I feel like was sort of like that immersion therapy for me. I was like, oh my gosh, after reading things like that, even something like that bothers me a little less. Like it's helped me actually have less of a problem with it. Maybe because I'm like, well, at least the tapeworm isn't going to do this or whatever.
Yeah, and that's one of the beautiful things with horror is like, here's a worst case scenario than is ever possible in real life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I just love that so much. And I'm so excited for that book, especially after you explained kind of what you're trying to accomplish with that and like the character you're exploring with Rabbit. I'm really excited to get to read that. And I just finished No Gods for Drowning, the audiobook, which was a really great experience.
Jodie Harris did such an amazing job narrating that. Like, and just like, it was so much for her to do. There's scenes where she's juggling like 3 or 4 accents while trying to pronounce these, you know, messy words that I wrote for this world.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know. And listening to the audiobook, I'm like, I have to figure out how to spell some of these things. but yeah, I was like, she's a stunning actress. Like I could not believe, those accents. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I think this person would sound like.
Yeah. And then also like, and then getting the tone, the cadence, like she's doing so much every moment of narrating that book. I'm so impressed with how she accomplished that.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was such a great book. And I will forgive you for the several times that you made me cry in that book. I'm sorry. Like, oh gosh, I know. I guess that's the goal, right? You want to affect people.
I mean, I don't sit thinking like this is going to really make people cry, but I have, sounds weird when I say it. Like I have cried for moments in my books, like while writing them or sometimes while rereading them. And I'm like, if I'm feeling that here, then probably somebody else is going to as well. But it's not the goal. I do want it to emotionally resonate. That is my big thing with my books and my stories is I really do want there to be an emotional resonance, whatever that happens to be. Maybe it delights you. Maybe it makes you cry. Maybe it makes you angry. Like a bunch of people gotten angry at me over A Game in Yellow. Maybe it disgusts you. Maybe it clarifies something in your life. Maybe you feel less alone. Like, just something. I want there to be an emotional resonance is my goal with what I do.
And you do a great job with that. And I was also really stunned by the way, like you wrote in this book, the gory aspects of it. It was like the ritualistic and emotionally like woven. And it kind of made it almost have like a grotesque like beauty to it for me. Like it was like really visceral, but it wasn't like, it was so unique to me from reading like other horror sometimes, which like I do love a good like slasher and splatter punk, done well. But I thought it was just a really beautiful book and just the setting, just the atmosphere. I thought like the dialogue was like flawless. I was just like, oh, this world is like amazing. And I was like, it would be a great movie even, but they might ruin it. And even
it would be an expensive movie.
That's actually, I was thinking the exact same thing. I was like, these sets would be crazy.
That's the thing. It frustrates me sometimes when I'm reading something and I can kind of feel that they wrote it with a budget in mind. It's like, well, this will make it more appealing if it feels like would be cheaper to make. Right. And I'm just like, I don't want to do that because like it's such a slim number of books that ever become movies. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, you are free to write whatever you want in books. It can be as outrageous as you please. It can be as grandiose as you please. It costs as much to print a paragraph of someone sitting in a small room as it does to have this like, you know, sweeping cityscape where like fire's raining from the sky and such. Mm-hmm. Like that budget for books is exactly the same. There's no reason to not think big.
Right. Yeah, that's the benefit of writing a book. Like you said, you can make the sets anything you want them. It's limitless, you know, the worlds you can build. So
like you don't have to, like, I mean, you want to limit yourself and you want to focus so that the reader can focus, but like you can have casts, you know, whatever size you want.
Right. Yeah, that was just amazing too. So when you were writing No Gods for Drowning, what drew you to exploring motherhood in that world? Because I feel like there's obviously major
it's a big thing
thread there.
I think it happened by accident, to be honest. I was in writing the characters, in writing how things function with the gods in this world and such. Mm-hmm. I don't think I realized it until a ways in that I was writing so much about motherhood. Like after I noticed it, I was like, there's a lot of that in there. There's a lot of connections between Lilac and her children, her connection with her mothers, the separation between her mothers, how that functions with, you know, as opposed to, you know, Ada or other characters. And just there's the brief moment later late in the book, I think it's in Simone's point of view, I'm not sure, it's been a while, but just this idea of like generations kind of dumping their problems onto the next generation. And you know, it's a question the book brings up that I admit I don't answer because I don't have an answer. There's obviously it's important to break generational cycles, traumatic cycles, but the doing of that is not easy, and the doing of that on a grand scale of like everyone is even harder. And the thing is, you fix some things, you break others. That's just kind of how time works.
Yeah, and Lilac's kind of, what do they call it, a fatal hero, or but she has that problem of like, how do I fix this mess? And
she's trying to fix everything. And it's just like, you know, it's a noble effort that it's one of those like best intentions pave the road to hell kind of situations. But at the same time, it's just like, you're just one woman. But at the same time, I think that's part of what makes her endearing, is that she's trying so damn hard. I always feel that when I'm watching or reading something and a character is just, there's so much stacked against them. They're trying so damn hard to do the right thing, even if it's an impossible situation. And it's just like, I really feel for that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us kind of look at things and it's just like, what can I do? It's like, you do what you can. And she's like, well, I can do, if I try hard enough, I can do everything. And it's like, no, that's not how that works.
Unfortunately. Yeah. And I feel like, I'm sure a lot of women tend to do that. And I loved that theme within the book, because maybe just because I am a mother now, I have like 2 toddlers, and I feel like I'm drawn to those themes a bit more too. And they just hit me like more poignantly, you know, the twins and things like that.
Yeah. I've had to apologize to a few people for
I know.
Like, they're just like, why, Hailey? And just like, it's just, that's what happened.
Yeah.
That's what happened in the story.
Yeah, there's no way around it. It's kind of, it propels, you know, some of her motivation forward. Obviously, you can't have that without, like, have the whole story without it. But
right. Yeah, that was it's one of those things where it's like, that happened, period. Whenever I'm writing, I don't feel like I'm inventing things. I feel like I'm realizing things. So it's like, and then if I try to change that, it feels like I'm just lying. And I want I want my work to feel honest. But that said, you do choose what you show and what you don't show. Like that didn't have to be an entire chapter. It could have just been something gets mentioned. But I feel that I felt it was important to show what she went through.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it really brings those characters to life. And that was one of my favorite chapters, to be honest. Just like, you could just envision the whole thing. And, you know, I liked the pace of it, you know, taking your time with it. And it was beautiful, well done, and also very sad. But like, moving on a little bit about more generalized like topics about horror, and like talking about you as an author. Do you ever feel like an expectation, whether from like readers or the industry, like about the kinds of stories you should be telling, especially like as a woman in horror? Do you ever feel that, the pressure, expectation?
That's a complicated question, or I should say it's not a complicated question. It's a complicated answer. I am not thinking about the reader while I'm writing this stuff. I think that's something you can do in editing, because that is a matter of communication. So like the art itself has to be raw, and I kind of just need to not think about anything while I'm doing it. I tend not to. I compartmentalize. I'm focused on the book or the story, and it's just, yeah, and which is good. It's freeing because it lets me avoid any sunk cost fallacy. If like something isn't working, it's like, okay, I can just discard those 10,000 words, whatever. Nobody's like, I didn't promise that to anybody. I didn't promise that section of the book to anybody or whatever. As far as like, so reader expectations, I'm aware of what some readers want based on what I see, but I'm not thinking about it. I feel that art is an expression of self, expression of perspectives and desires and motivations, all these different things, all these different parts of humanity. And I feel that when I read a book, I don't go open to like, I hope this gives me everything I want. It's not a restaurant order. You know, I'm connecting with the creator of this art on some level, or I hope to at least. So I look at it as readers like myself. I see what happens with some of the industry. I do understand that publishers, there's expectations. We need to simplify things. We need to kind of break them down a little bit more. We need to pre-chew the baby's food in a way. And I'm like, I reject that. I don't like that. I understand we're in a literacy crisis, but I also don't feel we get out of that by
dumbing down. Or,
I didn't want to say it that way, but that is essentially it. I don't want to do that because I feel that we can encourage people to have that stronger literacy, and two, I don't want to insult the intelligence of my readers. I don't believe in doing that, especially when, you know, as a woman in horror, I have a lot of women readers. They're perfectly capable of understanding complex themes, you know, lyrical prose, characters who don't just do like, I don't want to do it where it's like, well, what would the lowest common denominator of readers do in this situation? Because I know there's people who read this stuff and like, they expect the character to do whatever they would do. And I'm like, I don't feel that's increasing your emotional intelligence. I feel like you need to understand that different people do different things. And this is, if you want a character to do what you would do, that's what video games are for. Yeah. These are books, movies, music, whatever. And that's not to say video games aren't art, but they are very specific, like decision-based interactive art. Reading is also an interactive art, but it's not the same way. It's not decision-based. It is resonance. It is interpretation. It's perspective. I do feel that there's an expectation. Women are less read than men. Like that is just, it's a simple truth that there's a lot of people who will not read women, and that's not just men. There are women who will not read women. And there's an expectation to try to turn your art in a way that's going to appeal to those people. And a lot of that is try to write about men, try to focus on men. And that's difficult, I think, as a woman, but especially difficult as a queer woman who is like, my characters tend to be queer. They're interested in other women. And it's like, how can this not focus on men? And it's just like, because I don't want to. I think She Isn't Herself Tonight is definitely an exception because her ex destroyed her. And it's not obvious at first, but it becomes clear as you read the book why she's saying certain things about herself, why she thinks certain things about herself. This was not just he broke up with me and kicked me out. This was clearly, there was, in the years they were together, there was a time span of comments, passive aggressive things, little things that whittled away at her sense of self. And so it's probably more focused on a man than any of my other books in that sense, because that's where her mind is at times. And I don't know what that says as far as the book is concerned, but it definitely is like, I'll be interested to see how people feel about that. But I'm also like, all right, I did it. There's a book that, you know, there's a man focused of the books. And I say that when Alex and Cecil are very prominent characters in No Gods for Drowning, but that never felt like it was a matter of like this. I didn't do this out of expectation because I don't do that, but I didn't do that out of expectation either. That just, but it just,
and you're centralizing.
Right. But this is different because it's very much about a relationship. Like none of the other characters are in relationships with Alex and Cecil, where, you know, Lilac has her ex, the father of the twins. She's with Arcadia now. It's different because it's not a relationship focused book in that sense as much.
So there's a lot more character exploration or like
like that. I mean, it's No Gods for Drowning is a very plot book. Like the characters are driving the plot, but it's still a very plot book. And so this is different. She Isn't Herself is different for me because it's probably puts more thought towards a man. So hopefully everyone's happy with that, I guess. I don't know. I'm not going to swerve my writing based on those expectations. This is where that project went. Like I have to follow where the project leads. Otherwise it doesn't feel honest.
Yeah. And I think I have a feeling everyone is going to love it as much as everyone loves everything you've ever written. I know not everyone, you don't write for everyone, but I think definitely those, you know, loyal Hailey Piper fans. And, you know, it's just amazing. Your work is amazing. It's amazing horror. And so I'm really excited for it. I'm excited to see too. It sounds like you took a little creative risk, at least from your perspective. And
it was different. It was a very different project. I really just let her guide things a lot. And, you know, she was focused on her ex-boyfriend. So that's why there's a bunch of stuff about him in there. But it's like, that's fine because she needed to work through these feelings. And her life is completely falling apart now. And like, she's going through some body horror stuff with things growing out of her head, and
oh my gosh.
and like her reflection is, you know, starting to take on a life of its own, and like just chaos. But you know, it's still a horror book ultimately. Like we're kind of pitching as literary horror, and I think that makes sense because I see the difference between people see literary as like, oh, it's this, you know, this is stuff you put
like highbrow,
right? It's just like I see the difference as literary horror is literary work is very, very, very focused on the character. Whereas genre, and like it's more of a spectrum. It's not like a binary. So genre is like you get, started more towards plot. As far as what's taking over, I try to stay in the middle. I think that's where I'm happy. But this was much more leaning into that literary side. So I'm not shocked that the publisher Saga is just like, we think this is a literary horror book. And it's like, that's fine. You guys know better as far as where it goes on the shelf than I do. I'm doing the art. That stuff is a matter of, you know, labels and what you put in, and what's over the ISBN and such. Like, I don't pretend to be an expert at that stuff.
Yeah. But that sounds amazing. I mean, I love all, you know, mass market genre, but I love literary.
I read all kinds of things. Like it's like, and I think that's just part of being a reader is you're all over the place. But this one was a risk. It's very different. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm like, can I buy it now? But I'll wait.
You can pre-order it now.
Yes, exactly. Pre-order. Definitely want to do that. And yeah, so I was actually going to ask you about, you know, women in horror, or like the broad, like how the audience that women written horror reaches. And you kind of already talked about that. For some readers who may not like yet seek out horror by women, I guess, what do you think they're missing?
Everything. I think you're missing out on a whole range of perspectives. And I think you're missing out on how, you know, the crucial horror is. Like, I think there are women who aren't into horror who don't realize that how much horror they've experienced. Those of us who are women who are writing horror are very well aware of the horror we've experienced, are very well aware of the horror that is just part of life. I think, especially if you're into body horror, you are super missing out. If you're not reading horror by women, you're missing out on like a good chunk of humanity. Like I don't mean to make that sound insulting or something, but like, it's just the simple fact that's just like, you are limiting yourself. There are horrors you can't imagine, and you're not going to get by reading what men think of the final girl.
That's a great way to land that last statement. That I agree, because it's true. There's such a breadth of experiences and point of view out there that, yeah, you're just missing out on if you're not reading women in horror. But yeah, because you can only read so much of the same thing. And of course, we liked the final girl stories and things like that, but you know, that's had its time and it gets old and it can only be told, you know,
but it
so
just gets
times.
analyzed again and again. I'm just like, I don't care. I just don't care anymore. There's so much else you could be in like checking out, you know, interrogating about different, you know, narrative functions, societal functions. Like there's so much more to women than that. Yeah. And it's not to say that like all men stuff is the same either. Like there's different variety. There's another variety. You know, if you should be reading stuff from all genders and all backgrounds and such, because if you don't, you're missing out. Like honestly, like you should be willing to take in the full sum of humanity, in my opinion. But even regardless of like, try harder to diversify your reading, you're just missing out. You're just plain on missing out. Like that's to me, like, why would you just want a little bit of something when you could have all of it?
Yeah, why limit yourself? It's so like the fun and interesting.
Right.
Like,
you're hurting yourself here. It's not just about like, you know, what, as far as like publishing's biases towards people of different like marginalized groups and stuff. On a simple, selfish level, you should want to be reading different authors from different backgrounds so you can read more different kinds of stuff.
Yeah, well put. So, and that leads to my question, actually, to end the conversation, that I want to ask every person in each of my episodes, a sort of pass it on question. What's a horror book by a woman or underrepresented voice that you think people need to read?
So many, though. I'm going to just say right now, I think people should read Sleep Alone by J.A.W. McCarthy. It was out of print for a while. It was just re-released at the end of March. I think it's a very interesting book. It's a weird kind of melancholy rock and roll book. It feels like a ballad in text. It's about this woman. She's kind of the manager for this band, this like small time band that's on the road, and they're all like succubi. They're taking stuff from people. Part of these band events are not just to show their music, it's to feed. It's kind of just, it's this interesting, like, I'm trying to think of a way to put it that is just, I think everybody should read it. Like, I guess that's in a nutshell, but I think it's just this interesting introspective book. I think it's about not knowing what you're doing with your life, but as much as it's about draining people, it's about what what your responsibility is to other people and what your responsibility is to the actions. Because if I recall the book correctly, she turned the others into this, and what you'll do to avoid being lonely.
That sounds interesting, and I haven't read that yet, but I will now. So,
and it's a short read too. It's a novella, so I highly recommend. Yeah, Sleep Alone by J.W. McCarthy. But I could list 1,000 books, honestly, that I'm like, I should read this. You should read this. You should read this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the point. There's so much women in horror that you could just read it all year, all day.
Yeah.
And there's so much good work out there. But that's definitely, thank you for that one. That is a great suggestion for our listeners. And of course, thank you so much, Hailey. I've really loved this conversation. And thank you. And would you mind sharing with our listeners where they can follow you?
Absolutely. I'm on Instagram as Hailey Piper Fights, and I'm also on Blue Sky as Hailey Piper Fights, plus whatever the rest of the URL is on there, like bsky.social, I think. And then I have my website, www.haileypiper.com.
Amazing. Well, yeah, this movie doesn't end the way we want, and She Isn't Herself Tonight are both up for pre-order.
Yeah, this movie Doesn't End the Way We Want comes out, I think, September 15th. And She Isn't Herself Tonight comes out October 27th, right before Halloween.
Perfect. Perfect timing. So yeah, keep an eye out for those. And also, if you haven't read Hailey Piper yet, now's a good time to start. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's all for today's episode of Uncanny Women. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to catch our weekly episodes. You can also follow us at Uncanny Women Podcast and at Women in Horror Festival Co. See you next time.